Welcome back, and thank you for joining us once again. Tonight, we explore the story of a teenage girl who claimed she had been given a mission that seemed impossible. She had no military training, no political power, no noble title. Yet somehow, kings listened to her, armies followed her, and an entire nation placed its hopes in her hands. But not everyone saw her as a hero. To some, she was a threat. To others, she was a fraud. And before her story was over, she would face an accusation so powerful that it would change her life forever. Her name was Joan of Arc. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more remarkable stories from history. To understand Joan's story, you must first understand France. The year was around 1412. Europe was in the middle of the 100 Years' War, a long and devastating conflict between England and France. Despite its name, the war was not one continuous battle but a series of campaigns, truces, invasions, and political struggles that stretched across generations. By the time Joan was born, France was in crisis. Large portions of the kingdom were controlled by English forces and their allies. Cities had fallen. Armies had been defeated. Political divisions weakened the country from within. Many people believed France was slowly collapsing. Joan was born in the small village of Domremy in northeastern France. Her family were peasants. They farmed land, raised animals, attended church. Like most rural children of the era, Joan received little formal education. She could not read or write. Nothing about her background suggested she would one day influence kings and generals. History rarely announces its future heroes in advance. According to Joan's own testimony, everything changed when she was around 13 years old. She later claimed she began hearing voices. Not ordinary voices. She believed they belonged to heavenly figures, including Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret. The voices, she said, instructed her to help save France. Today, historians approach these claims carefully. What Joan experienced cannot be verified through historical evidence. We know only what she reported. Some scholars interpret the visions through religious belief. Others explore medical or psychological explanations. The truth remains unknowable. What is certain is that Joan believed the experiences were real. And that belief shaped the rest of her life. As the years passed, the voices allegedly gave her a specific mission. She was to help Charles, the uncrowned heir to the French throne, reclaim his kingdom. To most people, the idea would have sounded absurd. A teenage peasant girl claiming divine authority to influence a war. It seemed impossible. Yet Joan remained determined. Around the age of 17, she left home and began seeking support from local officials. At first, many dismissed her. Some laughed. Others ignored her. Why would experienced military leaders listen to an illiterate farm girl? But Joan possessed something difficult to explain. Confidence. Not arrogance. Conviction. The kind that makes people pause even when they disagree. Gradually, she convinced enough influential individuals to grant her an audience with Charles. One famous story from this period became part of Joan's legend. According to later accounts, Charles disguised himself among a crowd when Joan arrived at court. Supposedly, she identified him immediately despite never having seen him before. Historians debate the accuracy of this story. It may have been embellished over time. What is documented is that Joan eventually met Charles and impressed enough people that church officials examined her claims. After investigation, authorities found no evidence of heresy and allowed her to accompany French forces. That decision would change history. At the time, the city of Orleans stood under English siege. Its fall would have been a major disaster for France. French morale was already low. Many commanders believed the situation was nearly hopeless. Then Joan arrived. Carrying a banner rather than a weapon. Wearing armor rather than peasant clothing. And speaking with extraordinary certainty. Modern historians emphasize an important point. Joan was not a battlefield commander in the modern sense. She did not possess years of military training. She did not personally design every strategy. Professional soldiers still directed many operations. Yet her influence was undeniable. She inspired people. She energized troops. She convinced exhausted soldiers that victory remained possible. Sometimes morale becomes a weapon of its own. In 1429, French forces achieved a series of unexpected successes around Orleans. The siege was lifted. The victory stunned observers across Europe. For many supporters, Joan's reputation grew rapidly. To them, she appeared chosen by God. To her enemies, that same success created suspicion. Because if her claims were false, how could such victories occur? The more successful Joan became, the more controversial she became. After Orleans, momentum shifted. French forces continued advancing. Cities surrendered. Support for Charles increased. Perhaps the most symbolic achievement came when Charles was crowned King Charles VII at Reims Cathedral. For Joan, this moment represented the fulfillment of a central part of her mission. The peasant girl who claimed divine guidance had helped place a king upon the throne. Few stories in medieval history compare. But triumph rarely lasts forever. War remained brutal and unpredictable. In 1430, during military operations near Compiègne, Joan was captured by Burgundian forces allied with England. Her situation became extremely dangerous. Because her enemies understood something important. Defeating Joan militarily was one thing. Destroying her reputation was another. She was eventually transferred to English-controlled authorities and placed on trial. The proceedings that followed remain among the most famous legal cases in medieval history. Officially, the charges focused on heresy. In reality, politics surrounded every aspect of the trial. If Joan's claims could be discredited, then the legitimacy she brought to Charles VII might also be weakened. The stakes extended far beyond one person. The trial records survive today and provide remarkable insight into Joan's character. They reveal a young woman facing highly educated clerics determined to challenge her. Yet again and again, Joan demonstrated intelligence, composure, and courage. One exchange became particularly famous. When asked whether she was in God's grace, a theological trap designed to force self-incrimination, Joan reportedly replied, "If I am not, may God put me there, and if I am, may God so keep me." The answer impressed even some observers hostile to her. Still, the outcome was never truly in doubt. The court found her guilty. Among the accusations was her continued wearing of male military clothing. To modern readers, that charge may seem strange. But within the cultural and religious context of the 15th century, it became a major issue during the trial. Combined with her claims of divine visions, it helped authorities justify their verdict. On May 30, 1431, Joan of Arc was executed in Rouen. She was 19 years old. Witnesses later described her asking for a cross during her final moments. Accounts differ regarding specific details, but many contemporary observers, including some who had supported the trial, appeared disturbed by what they witnessed. Even among those who considered her guilty, questions lingered. Had justice truly been served? Or had politics overwhelmed truth? Those questions did not disappear. In fact, they grew stronger. As years passed, France's fortunes improved. English influence weakened. Charles VII remained on the throne. And Joan's memory endured. People remembered her victories. Her courage. Her unwavering belief in her mission. Gradually, attitudes began changing. In 1456, approximately 25 years after her death, a new church investigation re-examined the case. Witnesses testified. Evidence was reviewed. The original trial was scrutinized. The result was dramatic. The earlier verdict was overturned. Joan was officially declared innocent. The court concluded that serious errors and injustices had occurred during the first trial. For many French citizens, this decision confirmed what they already believed. Joan had been wrongfully condemned. Over the following centuries, her reputation continued growing. Writers celebrated her. Artists painted her. Political movements claimed her legacy. Religious communities honored her devotion. She became a symbol of courage, patriotism, and faith. Remarkably, people with very different beliefs often admired her for different reasons. Few historical figures unite such diverse interpretations. Then, in 1920, nearly 500 years after her execution, the Catholic Church canonized Joan of Arc as a saint. The teenager once branded a heretic became Saint Joan. The accused which became a spiritual icon. The condemned prisoner became one of the most celebrated figures in French history. It remains one of history's most extraordinary reversals. Of course, historians continue debating aspects of Joan's life. What exactly were her visions? How much influence did she exercise over military decisions? How should modern readers interpret her experiences? Reasonable scholars disagree on many questions. Yet certain facts remain beyond dispute. Joan inspired French forces during a critical moment of the Hundred Years' War. She played a significant role in the events leading to Charles VII's coronation. She was captured, tried, and executed. And later, her conviction was overturned. Those facts alone make her story remarkable. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Joan of Arc is not that she changed history. Many people have done that. It is how unlikely she seemed. A teenage peasant girl. No noble title. No formal military training. No political power. And yet kings listened to her. Armies followed her. Enemies feared her. Generations remembered her. The people who condemned Joan believed they were erasing her legacy. Instead, they ensured it would survive. Because history often remembers courage more clearly than authority. The judges who sentenced her are largely footnotes. The officials who accused her are mostly forgotten. But the young woman who stood before them all and refused to abandon her convictions remains known around the world. On that day in Rouen, many saw a witch being punished. History saw something different. A 19-year-old who challenged expectations, inspired a nation, and faced death with remarkable resolve. And in the centuries that followed, the girl once feared by powerful men became one of France's greatest heroes.